For those of you who have been following me for a while, you know that I love working with clay to create pieces, either for myself or as gifts. Aside from having fun, I certainly have picked up different tips and techniques that I wish I knew from the beginning. In this video, I'll take you along with me to make some new pieces and share things I wish I knew when I started polymer clay. Finding clay that works best for you. The same brand of clay can turn out very differently depending on the environment you're in and how much sweat or oil your hands produce. If you live in a cool and dry place like I do and your hands don't get sweaty easily, then a softer clay such as Sculpt Primo or Craft Smart might work well for you. If you live in a warm climate and your hands produce a fair amount of oil, then you may want to try out firmer clay like Fimo. This is a general rule of thumb, but since the feel of firm versus soft can be quite different for everyone, I'd recommend trying out different brands so you can be sure which one works best for you. Getting the primary colors from different brands and testing them out that way might be a good start. And you can use up the brands that don't make the cut by mixing them with your favorite brand down the road to minimize waste. Yes, mixing clay is totally okay. I've had great success with two brands, Sculpt Primo and Craft Smart. Both are easy to condition without straining my hands, and they hold their shape really well, allowing for detailed work without distortion. When comparing the two, Sculpt Primo is firmer and generally considered a high-quality, all-around good brand. Craft Smart, while softer, has worked really well for me in most applications. Some people report Craft Smart becoming brittle after baking, especially in thin pieces. But I haven't experienced this issue personally, possibly because I tend to work with thicker forms. Fimo also works well once it's been conditioned, but since it is firmer, I need to spend lots of time kneading it before I can shape it. And I find my fingers hurt a lot more after using this brand. I am considering a pasta machine for conditioning clay, so this may not be a problem at all once I do. Setting up the workspace. Lint and dirt are my least favorite things when working with clay. Instead of leaving all the cleaning work to after the bake, I'd like to do as much as possible to stop it from happening, which includes clothing choice. I wear light-colored clothing that does not produce a lot of lint, preferring white t-shirts over dark colors or materials that produce lots of fibers, like sweaters. Work surface preparation. I use this glass top as my work surface. I clean it thoroughly with rubbing alcohol before getting started and in between when I switch colors. You'd be surprised how easily the colors can transfer amongst each other. I use paper towel since it leaves little to no fiber on the glass. Tools preparation. Like the work surface, it's important to make sure that the tools are clean before using them to cut or sculpt. If you also work with air-dry clay like I do, you may want to clean your tools immediately after you are done to avoid clay caking onto your tools like this. Hand washing. I use hand soap to wash my hands thoroughly to remove any dirt or oil to make sure I have a clean slate before I start and in between when I switch colors. If you work with lots of colors and don't want to wash your hands every time, wiping your hands thoroughly using rubbing alcohol can also do the trick. Using a lint roller to remove dirt and lint also works really well, especially when you're in the middle of a project. Now, let's sculpt together. I have completed the body with this black color. Now I'm switching to white for the face and the belly. But first, let's clean the work surface. I've just washed my hands and now I'm using a lint roller to catch anything that may have been missed. If you also work with clay, you know this. No matter how careful we are with preparation, some lint will make it through and stick to the clay, especially white clay. Before baking, I use a cotton swab dipped in rubbing alcohol for spot cleaning. If you're adding an eye pin to your piece like I am, here's a tip to make it more secure. Use pliers to bend the end of the pin into a hook shape. Insert the hooked end into the clay. Twist the pin straight once it's inserted. This is a more secure way to apply the eye pin, but it still doesn't guarantee that the pin won't fall out. You can use some glue after baking to secure it even more. Baking your clay. The most important thing about baking the clay is to avoid underbaking. Underbaking means your clay wasn't baked for long enough or that the temperature of the oven is not high enough. Underbaked pieces can be brittle so they break easily, and even if they don't crumble right away, it won't last nearly as long as the properly baked ones. To make sure our pieces are properly baked, we need to follow the instructions on the package. Always read the instructions for the temperature and the length of time needed to properly bake our clay. And if your pieces are thicker, do the math to make sure you leave them in the oven for long enough. One thing that you may not realize is that the actual temperature of the oven can be different than what it shows on the screen, which can be the cause for underbaking or overbaking. This problem can easily be solved by putting a thermometer inside the oven so we can see the actual temperature and adjust accordingly. When I'm unsure if my pieces are baked for long enough, I make sure the oven is at the correct temperature and then leave the pieces in for 10 to 15 minutes longer. This is because under the right temperature, your clay should not burn, and I personally want to avoid underbaking as much as possible. Clean baked pieces. 100% acetone is my go-to to remove dirt, lint, or fingerprints after baking because it's so effective. But keep in mind that when you use a big amount, it can melt away your baked pieces, leaving it with dents, so be careful and start with a small amount. Acetone can also help to remove oil clinging onto baked pieces. Lightly clean the surface can prepare clay for a stronger bond with the glaze later. Sanding is another way to clean baked pieces since the clay has already hardened. Make sure to wet sand to avoid inhaling particles from the process. You can do this by either wetting your sandpaper or immersing your clay into a tub of water, or a combination of both. Glaze. For the finishing touch, I glaze my pieces. My go-to is UV resin. It not only toughens up the clay, but also gives it a gorgeous, glossy sheen. Although UV resin works really well as a glaze, remember that it's still toxic before it's fully cured. So I always make sure to have proper PPE when using it. This includes respirator mask with filter, gloves, and proper ventilation, opening the window and turning on the fan. Make sure to cure UV resin fully before touching it. The length of time needed to cure clay will depend on the intensity of your UV light and the thickness of the layer you've applied. My UV light is 48 watts and the instruction says that it needs 1 to 3 minutes to cure. But I like leaving my clay pieces for at least 7 to 8 minutes to ensure they're properly cured. It's usually more effective to apply multiple thin layers than one big thick layer for the best result. Not only is it easier for each layer to cure faster, you also have a chance to fix any imperfections with the following layer until you're happy with the result. Avoid bright areas when applying resin to avoid curing prematurely. This is definitely something I did not realize until I was in the middle of brushing resin onto my pieces. So now I make sure not to sit right under my big bright window. Thank you for following along with me. I hope this video helps answer some of your questions about working with polymer clay, and if you have some other tips I did not mention here, please leave a comment below. I'd love to know. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.